I read that you actually did run the single wing one time while you were at New Hampshire against Dartmouth, which was celebrating its 100th year of football. Is that correct?
We ran a couple plays out of the single wing that year, yeah. Ryan Day was our quarterback.
Was that fun?
Yeah, we had a kid like Ryan Day that could handle a lot of things, and he did a good job of it.
Did those plays go well? Do you remember?
We had some success. We ran it most of the year, so
Oh, okay.
it was a package for us.
And you know UCLA celebrating the 100th year. Might you bring that back for?
No.
Okay. Early in games, are you scripting plays on offense for a certain number of series or plays in games?
We script by situation, so we have first and second down calls, third down calls, red zone calls, coming out calls. So whatever the situation dictates, with everything from that standpoint in terms of what we do is all scripted. So what's our first third and short? What's our second third and short? What's our first third and medium? What's our second third and medium? So that's all done during the week. So our players have a pretty good understanding of what we're going to run in games, what we practice for.
And that lasts the entire game? You don't get to a cutoff point where you're more of ad-libbing or?
There's not really a cutoff point. It's just what's the situation in the game. So you got to figure out mathematically how many third and shorts are we going to have in the game. You're going to have somewhere between 3 and 6. So do you have 6 listed? You know what I mean? If you get into a game you've got an inordinate amount of third and shorts, then you probably go back to the first play call. But everything we do is based upon the appropriate number of snaps. How many openers do you have? Well, how many first and second downs are there during the course of a football game? So you have a list of 25 or 30 openers that you can choose from. You have 3 to 5 third and shorts. You don't have many extra longs, so you probably only have 3 extra longs on there. But if you get into extra long, you're going to have to call maybe one play twice, more than once. So, but every situation's like that. You'll go into the red zone with 25 plays scripted for the red zone. How many times do you get into the red zone? It all depends on how the game expresses itself.
The reason I asked that was because it seems like, I know there have been some exceptions, Washington State and Stanford are pretty good on offense the whole game, but season-wide, it seems like early in games, offense, first couple drives have been really good. Mm-hmm. Would you agree with that? Is there anything you can pinpoint?
No, we have been good,
that?
But it goes back to what we talk about all the time, is consistency. So if you can do it on one drive, why can't you do it on all drives? So
right.
It's at times you're calling the same plays, you executed it right once, and then we don't execute it right the second time. Now they have a hand in that too. The first time you called it, it was matched up versus a 2-shell, and then the next time you called it, they all out blitzed you. So they can have a hand in whether you're successful or not successful on their end, because they may switch what they're doing. So it's, that's kind of the give and take that goes on during a game. We know going into the game that they're 75% too deep on this down and distance. So you're probably calling a play that's good versus too deep. They didn't run too deep. They ran it the first time, they didn't run it the second time. So the first time it worked, the second time was their 25% where they're running another coverage. Didn't work out as much. So, you gotta, that's the game that goes on within a game. And there's times when you go into a game and hey, this team is 65% man, and then they don't play man at all. They play zone. So now you gotta kind of make adjustments within the game in terms of how they're approaching and how they're going to defend you. They may have defended the other 5 games you have on their breakdown this way, but they decided in your game they're going to do it this way. So that's the the fun part that goes back and forth during a game. So.
Arizona State has got a lot of offensive talent with Daniels and Benjamin, but they're only 105th in the country in scoring. What have you seen from their offense?
I think they're really talented, and I think sometimes when you look at statistics, they can get skewed. That they played in really bad weather last week against Utah and against a very, very good Utah team. So the numbers that they put up in that game, I think, skewed that. And I would imagine if you looked at those numbers before the Utah game, those numbers would have been a lot higher. But both of those guys and the receiving core is really, really talented. So you got one of the premier running backs in the league, one of the really good young quarterbacks in the league. So you're going to have to be prepared for all of that. You just don't look at the stats and say, hey, they're 105, so let's not be concerned. You always have to defend what they're best at. Those two guys can hurt you when they're at their best.
Can you pinpoint why there's a lack of consistency in the offense?
Can you pinpoint it?
Yeah.
If you could, you'd be the $1 million man. Can you pinpoint it? It's different times. There's a breakdown. You have a great play, and everybody's on the same page, and then you have another good play, and the right offensive tackle missed because of a step. And then on the next play, you have a great protection. You throw it, and the receiver drops the ball. And then on the next play, the guy's wide open, but the quarterback didn't have the right read. And then on the next play, the running back should have pressed it a little bit farther to the front side because that's where the hole developed, but he cut it back quickly because of what he saw. So it's not just one thing. I think if you could point to one thing, then you'd say, hey, just change that, then we're good. But it don't work that way. So, it's the more we work together as a group, as we talk about, the more at-bats we get, the better we get. So I think over the course of the season, because this group is young, and as they started to come together, they've gotten better as the season went along, and that's what you're looking for, progress. But no one's going to play a perfect game, and no one's going to be able to say that, hey, on this play, on these 75 plays we ran, all 11 guys executed to the best of their ability. It doesn't happen at any level. So, it's over the course of time. The guys that are really good are probably better than they are worse. 60% you grade out 65%. Next week you grade out at 68%. That's kind of what the process is all about.
Running game wise, I think you're over 200 yards the last 4 games. How much is that? Just Josh Kelly rounding into form? Is there other things going on?
Same thing. It's the offensive line coming together. You got 2 true freshmen on the left side that are continuing since the Washington State game to play together. So the more Duke and Sean get comfortable in terms of what they're doing, the better we are from that standpoint. Again, Boss just got moved. He played 8 games last year. He was after being a defensive lineman for his whole entire college career. So, you see Boss's growth and development as they come along. The same thing with Chris and Jake on the other side. So I think it's a combination of all that. Our tight ends are doing a better job, I would say, blocking now than they were earlier in the season, which you would hope during the course of the season you develop that a little bit. So, it's the same thing. I think the addition of Dimitrik has really helped it. I think we really had a backup, number 2 guy last year. I think the ability that when Josh isn't in, Dimitrik is in, that you got a really good 1-2 punch there. So, and I also think our quarterbacks have done a good job of using their legs when necessary to complement what Josh and Felton, those guys can do. So.
You had a couple of promising receivers last year, like in Ezekiel and Diamond. You haven't seen much from them. Are they just falling in the rotation? What's happened with those guys?
Well, Diamond's out right now, hurt, and Mike, has been in and out of the lineup. He's played better last week. It's just a matter of Mike being able to sustain consistent weeks over time. It seems like he starts moving, and then all of a sudden you're excited about him, but then there's something flares up and he's out for a week or so. So, for both those guys, it's the injury thing, but I think both of them are promising players.
Diamond, when was Diamond hurt?
Diamond's been hurt all year, so he hasn't played a snap this year.
Okay, what's his injury?
I'm on you, Ben. You're my injury expert. This was slipped through the cracks.
Yeah.
What's the date? Mark this down. Has not been Ben missed one. Diamond has not played all year, so he had a shoulder coming into this. He had surgery in the off season and he's coming back from that and trying to work through a couple things. So we'll see where he is with this thing. But that's good. We slipped one by you, Ben.
Since you like to be in the micro, I know you're not big on week-to-week momentum or anything like that, but is there anything to be gained carrying over from how completely your defense played last week?
No, I think it's an example, but as we tell our players, that's not a badge you put on your chest. That's a standard that you have to hold yourself to. So, that's the great thing about sports. Very rarely, especially in football, does anybody go every single year and play the same over the time. That's life. You look at Wisconsin. All of a sudden they get upset by Illinois. And everybody's talking about 2 weeks ahead of Wisconsin's going to play Ohio State. It's going to be a huge game. Well, you got to take care of the task at hand. And I think if you fall victim to that, it doesn't benefit you. So if you concentrate and focus on what you're supposed to concentrate and focus on, which is let's have a really good Wednesday, and that's it. And I think the better we can do that, the better we can stay in the moment, the better we're going to consistently perform in the moment when we play on Saturdays, and that's what we're trying to get accomplished. So, what happens in the past, you can learn from it. We're all students of history, and you can learn from other people's mistakes and your own mistakes, but you still have to always live in the moment and not talk about what's going on in the future. So, we're going to have a really good Wednesday, and that's what we're looking forward to having accomplish right now.
Has Ciale moved from defensive line to offensive line?
Right now he has, yeah. We're using him at both sides, so trying to find out what the best position is for him. So.
How's he look so far in offense?
He's looked good, and he's looked good on the D-line too. So right now, with our depth on the D-line, we didn't feel like he was going to play consistently right now, so let's take a look at him here, and then we'll make a decision at the end of the season where we think is the best position for Ciale.
It seems pretty obvious, and it's probably a football-wide trend, but the turnovers when you're in the good standing there, you win games, and when you're not, you lose games. It's really pronounced with this team. Do you reinforce that with these guys?
That's what we always have talked about, and I don't know if there's any football coach that doesn't talk about that.
Yeah.
if you just statistically look at it and take everything out of it and just look at the stats, the team that does not turn the ball over usually has a pretty good chance of winning, and the team that creates the most turnovers usually has a pretty good chance of winning. Now, there's always exceptions. Last week, Utah was -4 to Arizona State, but still won the football game. But that's a rarity. You can just look at the stats. +1 is 50 little. You're about 60%. +2, you're moving in towards the 70s. You go +3, you're probably 80s or 90. You go +4, you're probably 90%. You get a chance to win it. But that's been every coach I've ever been around, and I'm not sure there's any coach that doesn't talk about the turnover takeaways with their football team and emphasize that. Being really good at ball security on the offensive side of the ball and trying to create them on the defensive side of the ball. And why do they do it? Because the statistics will bear you out. There's probably not a bigger impact on the outcome of a football game than that. And those are things that you have to continue to work on. Those are fundamental things that we talk about all the time. And you emphasize all the time. And when you see it not being done properly, you have to correct it. When it's done properly, you have to praise it. And it's on both sides, whether you're creating it or whether you're securing it. That's really, if you look at one stat, and that's probably the first thing I always look at from the statistics standpoint. You got to go from there. And then part of it after that is what's your response after the turnover? Because I've been on teams where the defense gives you 4 turnovers and you go 3 and out right after they give it to you and you punt. You didn't do anything with what they gave you. The same thing is if your defense can kind of bow its back and take some pride when the offense does turn the ball over, that, hey, we're going to turn this, we're not going to let this affect us. That's part of it too. So there's a lot of intricacies that go on in it, but you're 100% right though. I would say that is the most glaring statistic in football at any level, whether it's Pop Warner, high school, college, or pros. That's you win the turnover battle consistently, you'll probably end up on the right side of the ledger most times.
Thank you.